I think that those are going to really move the needle. And I think that people will be very impressed the minute that a solid state or a glass battery moves its way into a Tesla. And so then when you have a battery that's highly impressive and a vehicle that everyone's familiar with and enjoys the experience, I think you have the iPhone of electric vehicles. And so
the one, the only value investor, Jack Hurley.
Hey, everybody. How are you?
Oh, the room has been talking about you, Jack. You know, the
Hopefully
room.
only good things.
So, yeah. Jack, before you tell us about yourself, we've been talking a lot about two stocks. So we're going to go about you for a minute, but you first got to start with this one that I'm not buying because I, as the host, I just don't feel comfortable. But TRUFF.
Yes, TRUFF, Red Light Holland. I personally started investing in psilocybin probably a year and a half ago. And I got to tell you, as a general value investor, I think it's one of the best opportunities out there. And so a lot of people focus on the medical side, and I think that's great. And there's a lot of opportunity there. But I personally think that TRUFF is one of the first actors to benefit from the retail side, and they avoid a lot of that regulatory agency interface, and they end up getting a lot of retail space for very cheap, especially during these times. So I think they did a great play by purchasing a large square footage of real estate, and they certainly have the packaging, the branding, and the personalities behind them to make a lot of money in the future. If you're going to give me a proposition to tell me that they're worth less than $100 million, I'm going to tell you yes every single time. So that's my personal personal opinion.
Have you talked to this company on the phone or like? I mean,
I've reached out to leadership a few times. I've talked to Todd a few times on the phone. I mean, he's an absolute pleasure to talk to. I mean, if you get on the phone with this guy for 10, 15 minutes, I mean, you can kind of understand why they have such a good road ahead of them. And, you know, just in general, their balance sheet looks really healthy. I like to see good financials in young companies. And so if they had to raise some additional capital to expand, I'd be happy with it personally. But I think he's the right personality to get behind them. And his history with Bruce Linton, I think, is also very interesting. So the whole story there is just so positive.
Okay, so then I have to go to this. Todd, is he the CEO of TRUFF?
Yes, he's the CEO.
Okay, then I got to go to this next thing. You said Bruce Linton. Why did you mention Bruce Linton?
So Bruce Linton, I have a history of investing in companies that are intertwined with Bruce.
Now tell us about Bruce Linton and how he's involved.
People formerly know him from the Canopy growth venture that he did years ago. He did very well by that. He moved on into the psilocybin space, or started mentioning the psilocybin space during that Canopy growth venture. So I started researching and seeing which ones he was involved with. And Mind Medicine was the first one that I found, and the second one was TRUFF. So Mind Medicine was the first one, and then after that I learned he was on the board of Red Light Holland. He seems to have a Midas touch in businesses, and he has a great entrepreneurial mind. So I like to follow those who lead by good example. So I moved things, you know, shuffled the best that I could to get as much Red Light Holland as I could stomach at the time.
So Bruce Linton's an investor in it?
He's on the board. I think he's smart in that he's, you know, in this particular way in My Medicine and Red Light Holland, he has a dual prong approach, right? He has the medical side, he has the retail side in a space that's relatively unexplored. And so I think if you could do well in those two things and kind of break through a wall, you know, for a business, that's very lucrative. Never mind the people that it will benefit as well, more importantly.
Now, has the stock fallen since you bought it? Like, what's the story?
I enter things relatively low. I usually try to stop buying at a certain threshold. So I am up on both positions. If you were to ask me on the street, if there were certain developments in the business, I'd be happy to buy more shares. There's a certain level where I say to myself, you know, that's a little above my appetite. So
okay. All right, got it. So
I try to be as disciplined as possible.
Do you know what kind of revenue it does?
No, I don't know their particular revenue offhand. I would say theoretically with the retail space that they purchased and the price per gram that they're looking at, you know, they could look at upwards of probably a few million to $10 million in upcoming quarters. You know, I don't know that particularly, but as a business, that's about where I would place them. So that's where I get my, you know, $100 million mark, where I say I'm willing to buy that business for that dollar amount.
Got it. I got it. I like it. All right. We're going to hold CLSK for one more second. We're not going to go there yet. Jack, just give us like 30 seconds about yourself. Cliff notes.
Of course. So I was actually born in Russia. A little fun fact about me.
Where?
I was adopted from Tula, Russia, which is a city slightly off of Moscow. And so I was adopted when I was about 2.5 years old from an orphanage there, from a family in New Jersey who actually flew all the way across to Russia to get me and brought me back to the U.S. And so, very fortunate person. I've been brought up in a Wall Street household. Both my parents worked on Wall Street for about 50 years collectively. So I actually grew up walking around data centers and going to New York City and looking at the flashing lights and all the tickers. In my life, I did chemistry, so I kind of rebelled and went to the scientific side. I worked in chemistry for about 6 years now. So I'm an organic synthetic chemist by training, but I've been investing since I was about 15 years old.
Got it. Okay. Wow. So we got to hear more about this.
You said Spark Notes, right? That's right. Yeah. I've read multiple value investment books. I read business books for fun. And so I'm that person who you say, I read 5 or 6 10Ks per week and a few 10Qs per month just to kind of keep myself fresh.
Go ahead. Tell us about your Tesla.
I'm just going to go on about Tesla. So yeah. I first purchased Tesla shares probably back in 2011 when I was in college. And I would see them in Pennsylvania near Villanova where I went to college. And every time I saw one, I would yell out Tesla and I would keep count. And so every year, if I saw more Teslas than the year before, I would buy more Tesla stock. Every single year since that year, I've seen more Teslas on the road wherever I go. And so as long as I see the adoption rate going up and the value of the vehicle continuously going up and the cost of making and manufacturing and moving that vehicle going down, economically, it makes complete sense, right? I see your point about Battery Day. I was also a little bit put off by Battery Day. I also wanted the grandiose statement about a battery. However, I will say that their acquisition of Maxwell Technologies was very, very, very quiet, and it was very, very impressive. And so if you look at solid state batteries and glass batteries, I think that those are going to really move the needle. And I think that people will be very impressed the minute that a solid state or a glass battery moves its way into a Tesla. And so then when you have a battery that's highly impressive and a vehicle that everyone's familiar with and enjoys the experience, I think you have the iPhone of electric vehicles. And so the minute that Tesla begins monetizing on that electric vehicle, either on the application side or the per day, per kilowatt charging or distribution of energy from that vehicle, is where I think their business model really takes off. And so that's my 2 cents on Tesla. I've bought them every couple of months. I have money lying around. I'll make sure I get more shares. I don't really dabble in options with Tesla just because it's as a value investor, I just want to own more of it, right? And then aside from that, I think we rented a Model Y for our vacation out in California, and I wanted to test the limits of what range anxiety really feels like. And so we rented the Tesla in San Francisco, and I drove all the way out throughout California for the week. And then we went out to Lake Tahoe, and then we went out to Reno, Nevada, all the way back to San Francisco. And so if I can do Yosemite and Lake Tahoe and Death Valley and all those places and back to San Francisco in a Tesla, I don't see any reason why anywhere else in the country you can't do the same thing. A lot of those paradigms have been really shattered by Tesla, and I think they're going to continue to do so.
Yep, I hear you.
One of my biggest motivators for this year was microgrids and DER. And so I started looking into this about 2.5 years ago when I was taking a class on sustainability and engineering and a couple of things. And I kept seeing articles pop up about microgrids. And so I read as much as I could on the topic for about a year and change. I wanted to do a project for a patent. I looked up patents for microgrids, and CleanSpark owned a very attractive one. And so when you look at the future of energy distribution and the way that people logically think about utilities and grids, that's changing, and it's benefiting every party involved. And so it's better for the consumer, it's better for the utility, it's better for society. And so CleanSpark was one of the first and early companies to really look at that, aside from Star Peak Energy. They're reverse merging with a competitor of theirs. And so I think some of these players that you see in small names that are out there in the market are really going to see some carving into the existing utility and electricity as a service business. And so I think that the revenues and the recurring nature of those businesses is very attractive. And so anyone who has a good foothold in that, I think, is a great business. And so CleanSpark, when I saw they were trading for $20 million on the open market, and they were anticipating $10 million worth of revenue, it was a no-brainer. And so I pretty much backed the truck up the best that I could at those prices and just said to myself, you know what? I'm onto something here. I've been reading about it long enough, and I think that there's a whole ecosystem that I think is going to emerge from this trend, and I think it's better for everybody. They did the purchase of the Bitcoin miner recently, right? And one of the biggest things that came out of that is that they single-handedly became the lowest cost producer of electricity. And so when you couple that with, a lot of other factors in the market, that's very attractive as a business, because in any commodity business, the lowest cost producer is very attractive. And so I think that serves very well for them in the future.
What was your original reason when you how'd you find CleanSpark? What was your original thing?
So it's funny. I found them because of the patent. I looked up microgrids and fractal grids and the nature of them, and the first installations, and their name popped up. And then after that, I moved on to a couple of financial filings, and I actually saw them. It had to be back in like January or February of 2020. And there was a huge spike from a PPP distribution or PPE distribution for COVID, right? They took some of their money and they made sure that they made localities have PPE for COVID responses. And that was part of their shtick. And I saw it spike on that day, and I said to myself, I'm not going to forget about this company, because it kind of intersects with everything I believe in terms of sustainability. And so ever since then, I've just bought shares, at intermittent periods at the best of my ability. And so that was almost a year ago now, believe it or not. But that's how they popped up on my radar. Was I saw a volume and some kind of spike, and it actually intersected with my research. So I didn't know at the time they were publicly traded, but I had found them on a technical or a scientific inquiry. And then I found out they were publicly traded. And typically when you believe in something or you learn about a topic and you learn that something you're interested in is publicly traded, you should probably go buy part of that business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing that's hard for like day traders is time. I bought lithium, LTHM, the stock lithium, and I bought LIT, the ETF. And I bought these 3 years ago. So I bought lithium at $10, $9, $12. Went down to $4. I bought it at $4. So my dollar cost is actually like $5.20 or maybe $4.90. It's not like at 16. And I didn't realize it's today, December 18th, because I have these call options that expire tomorrow, I guess. And I guess I'm going to let some convert to the stock of lithium. But I'm literally, as you're talking, I'm looking to my right, is because I'm exercising these calls that I own in this stock lithium. That I've owned these calls for like a year, and it's crazy the gain. But it's like what you're saying. You found this stock, CleanSpark. Yes, what I'm told from Viviana is that you bought it at $2, and we're at $17, right? Something like that. Have you sold some shares or?
No, I will not. If anybody wants to take my shares, they're going to have to pry it from my cold dead hands. And so that's personally how I feel about it. And the reason being is because I sold shares of Tesla to buy my first home, and I wish I hadn't. Right. And because I could have bought multiple homes with those same shares. And so every time that I think to myself, I should really get rid of these for the gain, typically I'm wrong. And I don't like being wrong. So I'm certainly not getting rid of my shares this year. I don't anticipate selling next year. It would really take a fundamental change in the business or another opportunity that's way more attractive for me to get rid of my shares.
Yeah, I hear you.
So CLSK, I think the management team, the leadership is positive. I think they could really benefit from the adoption rate that's across the U.S. They're really only locally concentrated in the U.S. for a majority of their business. They do have dealings in Lebanon and a few other countries, but I just want everybody to think about a world where a majority of the U.S. as well as other countries are adopting and integrating microgrids into their utilities. And imagine how much benefit that is to not only CleanSpark, but also Tesla, Starpeak, Nuve, and all of these other players. And consider yourself lucky to invest in a ecosystem or macroeconomic development of something that did not exist. Right. I mean, you don't have a lot of those opportunities in today's market.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Similarly to yourself, I told my brother about 4 years ago to buy Tesla, and he had bought a lot of other things. And I told him this is going to be just as valuable as those entities that you're buying today. And it came true. And so, I get the same calls from my siblings and my friends telling me, I wish I just bought Tesla pre-split at 150 like you told me.
Did your brother end up buying it though?
No, he still has not to this day. Which I'd agree with it. Why buy a launched rocket? It looks just as beautiful from the launch pad. Am I right, Elon?
Tell Jason he doesn't want to pay $17 because he feel like he missed the boat. But tell him there's another 100% upside on this stock for him to take his ego aside and buy some.
I would just tell you it's a good business to own. And so if you look at CAGR, if you look at revenue numbers, if you look at the industry, it's in its nascency. And so psychologically, I can understand the kicking yourself for not getting it at $2 and not calling me earlier. But at the same token, in a year, I think CleanSpark's revenues are gonna blow past expectations.
We had Chamath on, Chamath, the guy who's on CNBC a lot. We had him on our show about 2 months ago, but I listened to it and I'm like, okay, I just went and hit the buy button. I bought GBTC, I bought in Bitcoin, and I bought in Voyager. I know GBTC is has a premium amount of people that rip on me for owning that. but that's what I had.
I saw GBTC when it IPO'd, and it went up absurdly, and I couldn't chase the rocket, and I avoided it, and I kick myself every day because it IPO'd. I heard about Bitcoin, all these other things, but I never got on the ship. And so I like blockchain as a technology. I think it's really important and utilized. It's very helpful in business, and it definitely, gives efficiencies. As a value investor, it's tough for me to buy an intangible asset that is pegged as much as somebody is willing to pay for it. And so cryptos is a tough thing for me. I'm sure I'll come along at some point, but I may need some more people to convince me.
Me too. I mean, I get ripped on because I was like, basically Bitcoin moves up because it's like if more people want it. It's like one of those, I'm not saying glorified, but like an MLM. Like you need more people to. Yep. And I did an interview with Dave Portnoy from Barstool, and I was talking about that. and I own some, so I'm not like ripping on it. He doesn't own any, but that's what it is.
Imagine how I feel. I'm talking to all my friends about CleanSpark and how great of a business it's going to be, and they're all telling me to sell my CleanSpark and go buy Bitcoin. And now they're one and the same. And so don't I look like a hypocrite, right? And so now I guess I'm part of the Bitcoin craze in the train. So
all right. So last question, and hopefully you'll come on again in the future. So do you trade for a living?
I do not trade for a living. I'm actually employed. So I work for an oil and gas company. I've been here for about 5 years. I did analytical work here for a while, but I'm a self-employed value investor. That's how I would term myself.
All right. I mean, you're like electric EV and you're working at Exxon. I got it. I know they're doing EV2 stuff, but you definitely threw me off with that. If I had to guess what you were doing, that was not going to be it.
Exactly. And life has amazing things that it throws at you. So who knows where I'll be in the future.
I know you're doing really well in the markets, but I was like, this guy would be perfect at Benzinga. So if someone writes a story about this and mentions your name, it'll be on Robinhood. It'll be on Webull. It'll be everywhere. Our main business is a licenser of financial news. So we have a newsroom of 35 to 50 people, and some of them are right over where I'm looking to my left. And we're putting out 900 headlines a day and about 130 stories. And that's like our main business. So I guess what I'm saying is, Jack, you love the markets. You should be here and, building the dream.
I appreciate the olive branch. I'll have to put that in my pocket for consideration, but I'm happy to come on anytime. Whenever somebody reaches out to me or tells me about something that they bought years ago that did very well for them or whatever the case may be, I always just tell them, if somebody asks you about me or if somebody says something, just say something good. Just say something good about me. That's all I can ask. And so if enough people say good things about you, then, your sentiment is as good as any stock on the market.
But Jack, you're out there in the public and you're making calls. And some stocks aren't always going to go your way. And people are going to say nasty things. And the way I look at it is, if they're at least talking about you, maybe you're doing something right, I guess.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jack, Viviana. This is awesome. It's totally random.
For having me.
But I just bought CLSK and I bought a nice position. Like I'm probably maybe going to sell a little bit like on Friday, maybe not. We'll see. I added an extra zero by accident when I bought them. So I have like a nice position on this one. So I really did. I thought I bought a different amount.
So if you sell your CLSK, just shoot me a message. Tell me what price. I'll scoop those shares right from you.
Okay. Oh my God, I love this guy. That is some good practice, man. Love that. Viviana, great for the recommendation. By the way, Jack Hurley, when I looked up your Twitter, she didn't have it by the heart of the name. So there's another Jack Hurley. He has 2 followers. I'm like, all right, this is my guy. This is the guy. It wasn't you. It was pretty funny. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for joining. And hopefully you guys can both come on again. And don't be strangers. And Viviana, I'm going to get a Peloton so we can ride together. Ride. All right.
Awesome.
See you guys. Thanks for having me.
See you later. Yep. Thank you. Bye-bye.